Will this finally start to shift the world in the right direction? Well, when you look back through history, you can see that there's certain moments in time that are pivotal, that change the direction of the world that we're going into. We'll look at some of those today. And that's one reason why when we look at financial markets, we have to look at the politics, we have to look at the policies, because we can see that one policy has this drastic change into the future of the world. And that's exactly what we're looking at. A policy change that happened about a decade ago over in Europe has led us to the point we're at today with disastrous outcomes where all of Europe is beholden to Russia. But a new policy change now, today, could fix that and push the world back into the right direction. So let's take a look at that. And I'm going to show you both sides of this, all right? So right now you can see here's an article on The Guardian, and it says that Putin is rubbing his hands with glee after the EU votes to class gas, natural gas, and nuclear as green. So the greenies, the environmentalists, the climate catastropheers believe that we must shut down all types of fuel that's not renewable, or else the world will die because it gets 1 to 4 degrees warmer in the next 100 years. Now, I'm not going to get into the renewables such as wind and solar and how they're unreliables and they actually don't work in Europe because there's not enough wind or sun in Europe, and that's a whole nother video we could talk about. Maybe if you want, leave me a comment down below. But let's just say that they've said that all types of energy are bad because they're not renewable. And they've said that natural gas, of course it is natural gas, is bad, and even nuclear is bad as well. And that's led Europe to go on to this disastrous path where they have basically made themselves beholden to Russia because they don't want to get their natural gas out of the ground because of the climate. They don't want to use nuclear because of whatever the climate, even though there's no emissions, no carbon emissions from that. And so now they're dependent on Russia to get their natural gas. So they're saying here that the EU, the policy shift that happened is the EU has now voted to classify natural gas and nuclear as green energy, which would give the green light to Europe to become energy independent again. They wouldn't have to rely on and beg and plead Russia and Putin to give them energy because they could have their own. They could have their own natural gas, which they have a ton of natural gas in Europe that they can get, and they could have nuclear as well. Now, The Guardian says that Putin is rubbing his hands with glee. Why? Why would they say that? Well, one, they're super misguided, but well, let's dig into this a little bit. So it says here, the European Parliament has backed plans to label gas, natural gas, and nuclear energy as green. And one senior MP said that it was a dark day for the climate. The whole world's going to die now because they may use natural gas and nuclear energy. And we're gonna dig into that. It says the row began late last year. The EU's Green Investment Guidebook intended to help investors channel billions to clean power transition. So they basically are trying to tell these financial institutions what they can and cannot invest into. So let's see, if you don't invest into any new oil or natural gas or nuclear energy or any energy for that matter, if you don't invest into that, what do you think happens? You get less of it. You don't have any. It's not like you can magically snap your fingers and get more energy. These projects can take 3, 7, 10 years, depending on which project we're talking about, to come online. So when you don't invest into them for a decade, that means the underinvestment is going to lead to shortages, which is exactly where we're at. And so now they're saying, well, now investors could actually start to put investments back into natural gas and nuclear energy. Now, again, this isn't a magic wand they can fix overnight, but it's a step in the right direction. It says the European Commission decided some gas, and some nuclear projects could be included in the EU taxonomy of environmentally sustainable economic activities. So natural gas can be classed as sustainable investment if the same energy capacity cannot be generated with renewable sources. So energy has what's called energy density. So we can start at the bottom. We have burning dung, right? Cow manure. That has the least amount of energy, so you need buildings full of dung. Then you go up and you have let's say, wood. And so you see in the Amazon, they're chopping down the rainforest to clear it out to grow food, and then they burn the wood for energy. It's not very energy dense, so you have to burn tons of wood to get any energy, plus it's super pollutant. Then you move up, and then you get coal. Coal has way more energy in the density, so you need less coal. And it's much less pollutant than wood is. And then you move up, and then you have natural gas, which has even way more energy density. And then you move up to oil, and then you move up to nuclear. So it says here, if the same energy capacity cannot be generated with renewable sources. So as I said, in Europe, they don't have enough wind or sun to really power wind or solar. And so it looks like the capacity can't be generated with renewable sources, so it looks like they're going to have to go back to natural gas. And it says here, nuclear power can be called green if a project promises to deal with the radioactive waste. So surprise, surprise, technology's come a long way in the last 100 years. Would you have guessed that? And since we started putting nuclear power plants around about 70 years ago, things have also progressed. As a matter of fact, they've now found ways to use or recycle the spent fuel rods, which have been kind of the crux of this matter. So if they promise to deal with radioactive waste, the spent fuel rods, which they have, they can move on to nuclear power, which is a good deal as well. The plan can only be stopped by a majority of the member states. However, most EU governments are in favor. Now, of course, they're in favor because they don't have any energy. They're 100% dependent on Putin to give them energy, which has put them into a very bad position geopolitically, and the people are ready to revolt. They don't have the energy. Their prices have gone through the roof. They can't afford them. They don't have enough natural gas to produce the electricity. They don't have enough natural gas to produce the fertilizer, which they need the fertilizer to make the food. It is a huge, huge problem. So, of course, they're going with it. Most EU governments are in favor. Now, the EU is sending a disastrous signal, they say, to investors in the rest of the world that it recognized fossil gas and nuclear as sustainable investments. Wow. The head of the IPCC said, "I'm in shock. Russia's war against Ukraine is a war paid for by climate heating fossil fuels, and the European Parliament just voted to boost billions of funding to fossil gas from Russia." So that's the part of the intro that we opened up with, that Putin is rubbing his hands. Well, yes, they're right that what's been funding the war to Russia is buying all the fossil fuels from Russia. But what if they produce the fossil fuels themselves? What if they turn their nuclear reactors back on so they don't even need to buy the gas in the first place? Wouldn't that stop sending money to Russia? Of course, the answer is yes. So they're using these crazy alarmist headlines to get you to act. Now, let's take a look at this. So I talked about these different types of energy. Here's a good chart you can see. Coal right here is the least clean. Oil is more clean. Natural gas is even more clean. And then we have hydro, solar, and wind, and then we have nuclear. So nuclear is the cleanest form of electricity. So if their goal, in my opinion, probably not the best goal to go after, but if their goal is to reduce carbon emissions down to zero, well, then you would want to use the most energy dense, most densely energy that you can have, and the cleanest, which it shows right here is clearly nuclear. Everybody knows this. Now, to illustrate this, Germany used to have a bunch of nuclear power plants, but they decided that they want to start shutting them down. As a matter of fact, they've been shutting down over half of their nuclear power plants, which is why now they need all the natural gas from Putin. So they don't produce the natural gas themselves. They've shut down their nuclear, so then they have to buy it from somebody else, which of course they've done that. Now, what has been the problem with them doing that? Well, besides funding the war, look what's happened in Germany. We've seen the electricity prices for households in Germany have risen over the last decade, and have risen astronomically in the last decade. So not only is it painful for everybody living in Germany, seeing their prices go up astronomically, but they're beholden to a country they're trying to defend themselves against, which is Russia, when they could just get their own energy, and they could increase their own economy, and they could help their own citizens, which seems like a better way to me, but what do I know? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave me a comment down below. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. If you don't like the video, give me a thumbs down. That's okay. Oh, and while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate that. Until next time, to your success, I'm out.